Yesterday, the Congressional Budget Office, led by a director who was handpicked by current HHS Secretary Tom Price, Donald Trump's appointee, released its analysis of the House Republican health care bill, Trumpcare. The bill makes clear that Trumpcare would be a cancer on the American health care system, causing costs to skyrocket, making coverage unaffordable for many seniors and those with pre-existing conditions, all the while leaving 23 million Americans with health insurance, fewer Americans with health insurance. Now, when people hear this, they say, why would the Republicans want to do it? That just seems mean-spirited. Well, I'll tell you why. Because their number one goal is to give a tax break for the wealthiest of Americans. People making above $250,000 pay an additional charge to help everyone else with health care on their unearned income, not on what they do when they're working, but on stocks and bonds and investments. And the number one goal of our colleagues across the aisle, sadly, is to help those very rich people get even richer. Now, to do that, they got to take away people's health care. To get the money for those tax breaks, they take away people's health care. So the bottom line is very simple. Unless you're a healthy millionaire, Trumpcare is a nightmare. And I think that's why our Republican colleagues are having such trouble putting together their own bill, because, as Senator Durbin has noted, they've excluded us from their negotiations. Well, the CBO report ought to be a final nail in the coffin of the Republican effort to sabotage our health care system. Republicans in Washington and the president should read the report cover to cover, throw their bill in the trash can, and begin working with Democrats on a real plan to lower costs and improve care. There's a lot to unpack in this report. It came out late yesterday, so I want to focus on a couple of provisions this morning. First, on health insurance costs. The CBO report makes clear that premiums under this bill are headed up in the next several years. Consumers would see their premiums increase by 20% for next year's plans. Now, Republicans will crow about premiums going down in the outer years, years away, but the decrease in premiums only occurs for one reason. The quality of the insurance will plummet. If you have a bare bones plan that hardly helps you, where you have to pay huge deductibles, huge co-payments, huge premiums, huge co-payments and premiums, and it covers next to nothing, of course the cost will eventually go down. What good is that? Why even talk about that kind of health care? People don't need it and don't want it. Cheaper insurance isn't going to help anyone if it doesn't actually lead to the health care people need. Listen to this one. Older Americans, everyone in America, 50 to 64, doesn't have a lot of income, making, say, $25,000 a year. Trumpcare is going to force you to pinch pennies just to be able to afford health insurance. The CBO report says that some seniors could see their premiums go up a whopping 800% under this bill. In one of the newspaper articles I saw, I think the senior citizen was in his early 60s. They were making about $25,000, $30,000 a year, not unusual for a senior of that age. And their premiums went up from $1,700 to $13,000. How are you going to vote for that, my friends? Telling these people who've worked hard their whole lives so that they have to pay a lot more, and a lot of that money is going to wealthy people for a tax cut? What about out-of-pocket expenses? According to the CBO reports, by the way, out-of-pocket expenses really bother people. How many of us have heard over and over again, I have health care, and when I went to the doctor, they said, you first got to lay out $5,000. How many of us have heard that? Everybody. The Republican bill makes it worse. According to the CBO report, out-of-pocket costs could balloon for vital services in states where they decline to cover essential health benefits. Americans could be paying thousands of dollars more every year if they need maternity care or programs that treat substance abuse or mental health services. Listen to this one. According to reports, in states that elect not to include maternity care, which every state could elect to do under the Republican bill, and many will, insurers would most likely sell maternity benefits as an add-on at $1,000 a month, $17,000 more in total. Under Trumpcare, women may well have to pay more, much more insurance just because they're a woman, because of pregnancy. Second, so costs go up, up, up. And if, God forbid, this bill becomes law and costs go up, any member of this any citizen of this country should go to their senators who vote for this and say, what the heck did you do? You made it worse. Now, uncertainty in the market, second issue. The CBO report confirms that the Republican attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act and the Trump administration's refusal to guarantee to continue making cost-sharing payments is causing the instability in the market. Here's what the report says. Now, this is the report put out by the Republican-appointed head of CBO. So this is not some Democratic propaganda-type document. These are just the facts, ma'am, as Mr. Friday said. Quote, here's what the report says. Substantial uncertainty about the enforcement of the individual mandate and about future payments of the cost-sharing subsidies, unquote, have led insurers to withdraw from the current marketplace. AHIP, that's the biggest organization of our nation's insurers, the insurance companies. They're nonpartisan. They said the same thing. Why, if our colleagues want more people to stay in the market and are complaining that people are leaving the market, don't we come together, hopefully with the president, who's got this, he could do this on his own, and say we're going to make this cost sharing permanent? We all know insurers want certainty in the future or they pull out. That's what insurance business is all about. And yet, grudgingly, one little step at a time, they don't take away the cost sharing because they know the damage it would do. This is President Trump. But they're afraid to make it permanent, and that causes problems. So there's only one word for what the president is doing and our Republican colleagues are doing when it comes to the present health care system: sabotage. If our Republican friends continue to allow the president to play coy about these cost-sharing payments, which bring premiums down, which bring costs for average citizens down, if they continue to allow the president to play coy about these payments as a potential threat, if we don't make cost-sharing permanent, the system will deteriorate. And again, it'll be on the president's back and our colleagues' back. I hate to say that, but those are the facts. We want to make it permanent. We tried to put it in the budget, in the appropriations bill, to make it permanent, which would have kept costs lower, kept people in the exchanges. Our colleagues said no. Okay, finally, pre-existing conditions. The CBO report states, this is a direct quote, people who are less healthy would ultimately be unable to purchase comprehensive non-group health insurance at premiums comparable to those under present law, if they could purchase it at all. Let me repeat the last part of the CBO report written by an appointee of our Republican head of HHS. If they could purchase it at all. Think about that for a minute. Under Trumpcare, if you have a pre-existing condition, if you're sick, your health insurance costs could go up so high you can't afford insurance. How many of us, before the new health care law passed under President Obama, how many of us heard of families? My daughter has cancer, but the insurance company won't cover me, or I got kicked off, and I have to watch her suffer because I can't afford the treatment, the payments. It's horrible, heart-wrenching. Going back to those days under this bill, unfortunately. The report ought to be this report ought to be the final nail in the coffin of the Republican effort to sabotage our health care system. And get my pages straight here. It'll make much more certain that sick people priced out of insurance companies, the most vulnerable, are left high and dry when they need care the most, when there's an illness in the family. Is that the sort of healthcare system our colleagues envision for this country? When you're sick, when one of your family members is sick, that's when they're not allowed to give you health care? What the heck do you have it for? Certainly hope that's not the idea on the other side of the aisle, but this bill that the House passed would do it. So, in conclusion, Mr. President, the nonpartisan scorekeepers have spoken loudly and clearly, no ambiguity. Trumpcare means higher costs and less care for the American people, for the average American. Let's not lose sight of what's at stake here. The health and well-being of the American people is on the line. There are life and death consequences for so many millions of people. They are relying on us to get this right. So for the good of the country, President Trump and our Republican colleagues should abandon Trumpcare, stop sabotaging the health care system, and work with Democrats. We are waiting to fix our health care system, not pull the plug on it.